We're here at Create this week and recording some very special podcasts for Nation's Restaurant News. We're going to be interviewing 8 different executives from restaurants and also from the investor community to explore different themes from each of the chapters of the path to digital maturity. Hi everyone, today we are joined by Robin Robertson, who is the COO of Modern Market Eateries, advisory member for Lunchbox and our Restaurant Leadership Conference. And you've got a long operations history with Red Robin, Bob Evans, and of course Brinker. And today we're here to talk to you about some of the concepts from our 4th chapter, optimizing throughput. And for all the new channels, all the new technology that's come into our restaurants, ops has never been as complex as it is today. So thanks for being here.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I'm excited.
Awesome. The first thing I notice about Modern Market Eatery is that it is a beautiful fast casual experience. The front of house is gorgeous. You offer not only great food, but also alcohol, patio, just a lot of reasons to be in the restaurant. And yet, the majority of sales are off-premise, either takeout or delivery. So tell us a little bit about how operating a business with so many different channels is complex and different from how it used to be.
Our restaurants are so beautiful and so welcoming, and yet we continue to drive off-premise, even though our on-prem is much greater than it was even 6 months ago. So I think the complexity really is for our operators, quite honestly, and somewhat for our guests. Years ago, you really just took care of dine-in guests. And now you have to figure out what hospitality in a bag looks like versus delivering it to a table. I think the guest is the same. The guest wants accuracy with their food. They want it to be timely. Of course, they want it to be delicious, but it's a different component when you're putting it in boxes and bags versus taking it to a table. The complexity level has increased. With that, some of the anxiety has increased in the restaurants, and just figuring out how to decrease anxiety while delivering on those components for our guests has been the biggest challenge.
It's a good use of the word anxiety because in many ways we've had all of this happen at the same time as the labor crisis, the biggest labor crisis I think the industry has ever had. And so the culture and the way in which you're helping your people be able to handle that anxiety must be particularly important.
It's really interesting to see how our people handle it. And what I've observed is in a lot of restaurants, but Modern Market obviously in particular, heads down, focused on looking at items coming through the line to make sure they're right, because that's what we want. It used to be heads up, smiling, welcoming a guest, noticing people walking by or coming in the restaurant. And so I've really thought a lot about this and done a lot of research around the guest experience itself. How to reduce anxiety with our team is to spread joy within our team. The guest experience isn't going to be better than the team member experience. And so really trying to spread joy amongst our team first so they can spread joy to our guests, and that helps reduce the anxiety.
So when we talk about the way in which complexity has changed, it's always been complex running ops for restaurants for sure, but it must have changed quite considerably over the last 10 years. Can you talk to us about what are the key threads of change that you see?
It's mostly around making sure that your use of technology is such that you can simplify operations as much as possible. And what I mean by that is knowing if the order is for off-prem or in the restaurant is important. It dictates whether you use dine-in plateware or takeout items, right? I have what I call my personal board of directors that is on a text thread, and I'll ask people throughout the industry that are with other restaurant brands, how are you guys doing this, right? And so early on during COVID, we didn't have bags that sealed, and everybody was afraid. And so we took zip ties and zip tied bags. Now we've gone to, believe it or not, stapling bags on the front side of the expo, just to make sure once that bag is stapled, it's our seal, it's our promise that everything in that bag is correct, right, and delicious.
when you talk about hospitality, and you answer your first question, and then the simplicity aspect there, and the way in which hospitality all the way gets through to the guest on their kitchen table. We were reported, I think, 1 in 3 drivers were potentially taking a French fry or something from the bags in the worst times of it. So you can understand why restaurants have had to adapt to that.
Yeah.
Do you have a favorite piece of technology that you feel like really helps the team get out of the weeds and be able to pull up and, as you said, have their head up and looking out at the guest rather than down at the task that they're doing?
I'll name 2 things. Number 1 is in our newest restaurants, we've gone away from big screens where team members have to look up at the screen, read what's on the screen, and then look down. So we actually have printers that will print for each item a sticky chit, piece of paper, that allows the team member to be looking at the item and look at the chit and see exactly what's supposed to be on that item. So it's really simplified for them. Does this match this? We know now. This is the ticket that matches this bowl, whether it's takeout or dine-in. Mm-hmm. The other thing is getting somebody on the front side of our expo. So we're behind the line, heads down, just making items as fast as we can, or fast casual. Now we've tried to position as frequently as possible somebody on the front side that can greet from a hospitality perspective the drivers that are coming in, and our guests as well, the guests that are coming in to pick food up or deliver food to the table in a very personable, hospitable, friendly way.
Mm.
So specifically in the back of house, we talk in chapter 4 of our second book a lot about determining throughput capacity. As you think about doing that inside of the Modern Market restaurant, how do you determine the throughput capacity? Like, how many dishes can you put out in an hour?
Yeah.
What makes that hard?
The interesting thing for us was during COVID, right at the start of COVID, we had decided to remodel a restaurant. And part of that remodel was to put in a double-sided line. And the theory of this double-sided line was to have team members that could work both sides of the line at the same time. Now, a lot of companies have gone to a secondary line somewhere else. I always felt that that was a lot to manage, to staff somebody there and here, as well as product, right? The first in, first out, and how do you do all that? And kudos to somebody for thinking of it. We just took a little different spin and said, we're gonna produce everything from the same line. It's just when we get busy, we're gonna turn on line B. So we have line A going, we'll turn on line B. All sales are going through that line. And ultimately, back to the question about throughput, we've been able to not precisely determine throughput, but to be able to say in this particular restaurant, very high volume, that we can do $400 to $4,500 in an hour of sales, and our metric of success is ticket times. So we've been able to keep the ticket time around that 3-minute or under mark, whereas the rest of our system, other than our brand new restaurant that also has a double-sided line, is around that 6 to 7 minute mark.
Oh, wow.
So we know that it's working. We know that it takes volume better than anything else, so much so that we are actually building a drive-through restaurant for the first time.
Exciting. And just to describe that for people who haven't not seen it and are listening, many restaurants, as you said, have 2 lines. So you imagine a Chipotle with their front make line and then the back, what they call digital kitchen. 2 separate lines, each of them fully staffed, each of them with their own set of ingredients that they're cooking down.
Yeah.
And in your restaurant, you've got a single set of ingredients that are shared by 2 make lines. And so the staff is pulling from the same pool of ingredients to
Exactly.
make things. So that's what you're describing. So you're able to get that almost 2x in output benefit without doubling the amount of ingredients on the line that they're pulling from, and therefore potentially the prep hours, the waste, all of those other things that go with it.
With one line where you have people working on both sides, as you described, Meredith, you know by your hourly sales or half-hour sales when to project having that B side turned on and staffing it appropriately.
And you're able, with your technology, to toggle that B side on and off, right?
Exactly.
Times.
Yep.
That's great.
So your newest prototype, I think it's called Fitzsimmons,
Yes.
which you'll have to tell us the story behind the name Fitzsimmons, but it takes a fundamentally different approach to driving throughput. Can you take us through the important innovations attributed to that model and what drove the brand's decisions to deploy them?
Fitzsimmons first, I grew up in Colorado, so this is a Colorado restaurant, and Fitzsimmons used to be an army base. And so at that time when I was growing up, it was just an army base, and it's now shifted to basically a medical center. So it's training of medical professionals. It's 4 different hospital systems right across the street from us. They've kept the history of the word Fitzsimmons, but complete shift in what the area represents. So lots of wonderful housing going up to continue to boost our sales. We took the learnings from that first restaurant, that high volume restaurant with the double-sided line, to Fitzsimmons and said, we can build this in a brand new restaurant. And so we did. We don't have any hoods in the restaurant.
Okay.
It's completely electrical, no gas.
Wow.
Which a lot of cities are going to across the U.S.
Yes.
So we tried to stay a little bit ahead of that and test that out. And we put in the double-sided line, and we've seen just an amazing replication of the first restaurant, with ticket times being low, the line being able to turn on when we need it to, especially with the catering component in there. So it's been a huge win for us.
I love that. We say often that electrification is a precondition to automation. It's very difficult to automate gas, and I think we see that with cars, right? Nobody went out and tried to make an automated combustion engine. It would be way too hard. Instead, Tesla created an electric car so that they could automate it. It was much easier. And yes, there are cities that for environmental reasons are dictating all electric kitchens. But I think that all-electric kitchen is going to enable future automation that we haven't even thought of yet, right? We're right now in this early stages of innovation trying to create robots and all these things. But you're able to use something like a smart oven or sous vide cooking in order to replicate the food outcome that tastes the same, but can be at least semi-automated in some of the steps along the way, right?
Yeah, so what's interesting about our ovens, our combi ovens, iCombis, is that our culinary team can download recipes through the internet to the oven, and then every team has the exact same recipe at the exact same time. So
without
automation.
having to be trained on go through this step and then do these things.
I'm cooking salmon, I push a button.
Especially with your full service background, that is so different from having to train a line cook, right?
So different, yeah. And the consistency of the product. I mean, let's be honest, there's the opportunity with the human element to not make it correct, right? And this helps eliminate at least one piece of that.
Amazing.
I bet your teams that are working in that concept, they must be enjoying the fact that it's been purpose-built. And so it's almost more seamless, more frictionless for them to be able to operate in. I was listening to Frances Allen, the CEO of Checkers and Rallies, a few weeks back at a conference, and she said their drive-through of the future was designed by the kitchen first. And so it must be quite empowering for them just to feel how frictionless it feels now.
It's empowering and pride, right? You see people stand up a little straighter in that restaurant when we bring people through to show off Fitzsimmons. You can just see a glow in people's face, and I think it comes from reducing that anxiety, right? It's just easier for our teams on all kinds of levels. The other thing we did there was we put our prep area basically right behind the make line. So next to that oven and next to the walk-in sits our prep area. So the prep person can be prepping something, but look up and see if I need to shift and go to the line to support. So that slide deployment becomes so much easier in a restaurant like Fitzsimmons.
So for those people who have not had the pleasure of eating at Modern Market Eatery, which I imagine is quite a few of our listeners because most of the stores are in Colorado and Texas and Arizona nearby, but really in the center of the country. The menu is incredibly, from a consumer standpoint, complex, right? There are so many interesting varieties, really rich cultural infusion into the food. It is very different from standard fast food, and yet you're talking about ticket times of 3 minutes, right? And that to me is incredible. And I think that speaks to the value of this technology, that it isn't just take something fast and make it faster, take something cheap and make it cheaper. it's actually enabling us to unlock, take something elevated and make it faster and cheaper, right?
Yeah, and I would add to that that the technology isn't holding a bunch of holding units where it's pre-done to get to that 3-minute ticket time. These items are being produced in the moment as they come in. So the real magic, I would say, is in the prep area, making sure that everything's ready for the line so that those items can be made quickly and efficiently. We were talking about the combi ovens. We take the approach to cook less more often in our combi ovens. So if it's 10 pieces of salmon to get us started for the day or the evening, then let's stay with 10 based on product mix, and then cook more frequently throughout the day, but not cook a bunch off and hold it, which is just an amazing product then.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So we talked a little bit in accuracy around the use of the sticky chits on the line to help ensure accuracy. What other tips do you have, particularly in an off-premise setting where it's not easy to course correct and when something goes out wrong? What tips do you have for ensuring accuracy in that environment?
Yeah, this one is really interesting because my first response is a human response versus a technology response. My human response is, let's focus on retaining people. Because we know when we retain people in this industry at large, when we retain people, they get better at their jobs, they become more proficient at their jobs, they're able to know exactly what goes into what item almost by second nature. So I would say first and primarily is retention of our people, creating that joy that I talked about with your internal team and shifting from finding people and interviewing people and hiring people to retaining people, I think has to be the primary shift. And let's be honest, we did ourselves a bit of a disservice, and rightly so, with COVID. You know, we were one of the very first industries to shut it all down. Restaurants just shut down, as you guys know. And we pivoted really quickly and opened it up for off-prem, but we reduced to 3, 4, 5 people in every restaurant from a staff of 30 or 20. So people trusting us in this industry, we have an opportunity to rebuild that trust. All of that said, from a technology perspective, I think, again, those sticky chits help by the time the items get to our expo station. The chit is on the item and the expo has the opportunity to look at that, but then look at their screen and say, all of this goes together either in this bag or on this tray to be delivered to the guest. And so we've made it somewhat easier in that everything on the screen will tell the expo, is it a dine-in guest? Is it a DoorDasher that's coming in? Is it Grubhub? Is it a guest coming in picking up a web pickup? So all of that information is readily available at Expo so that the mechanism by which the guest gets the food is really accurate.
And do you find that sharing that information and then also making it easier to execute through all of the other things that we just talked about actually have the side benefit of reducing turnover in the restaurant?
I would say yes, overall. That helps with turnover.
It's interesting for me because we know now, of course, accuracy levels, it's being monitored by each of the marketplaces. If you have a problem unit that has problem with accuracy, it's going to affect where your store appears on the listings. And so even that level of transparency must help you from a position of an executive overlooking everything for all the operations to be able to pinpoint where particular problems are happening.
Yeah, we have a BI tool that we use that pulls in all of the third-party platforms for accuracy of missing items. So the teams can see in one place, which is really nice, whether or not they are being accurate by platform and whether they're missing items, and if the guest tells us what the item is that's missing, right there in one spot. So, and we've been very, very low with around 2% inaccuracy. And as a matter of fact, DoorDash says that that is in the upper quartile.
That's pretty good. I haven't heard many 2% out there. Let's finish up. A question that we get asked a lot is all around automation, the restaurant of the future. So I'm curious for your take. How is automation going to help you and your business find further efficiencies in the future?
I think the interesting thing about automation for us is kind of what's next. We've always been on the forefront of innovation, and being small and willing We want to entertain things that will help us continue to be better. One of the things I've seen recently are cameras that look down over the line that will actually, tell you whether or not an item or an ingredient is missing in an item based on the way it was ordered. So we're really interested in that piece as well. So I'd say that's the big one we're looking at probably a few months down the road. We have to get our drive-through kicked off properly first. But we've also been working on how our menu boards are presented for our guests. And how does that look in the restaurant? It has to look beautiful and be easy for our guests to read. But online, it has to represent the same thing with beautiful visual cues with our amazing food. And then apply that all to a drive-through and what's correct to happen in a drive-through as well. So it should be interesting in the next few months.
Yes, we are certainly in early innings of all of this still, aren't we? But Robin, thank you so much for joining us today. Looking forward to keeping in touch, and we wish you all the very best of luck.
Thanks. And come eat at Modern Market.
We will. We've got the bottle. You've got to show everyone look at this.
Yes.
Beautiful bottle.
Beautiful
I think this
bottle.
is emblematic of how beautiful the restaurant is. It's one of the nicest water bottles I've ever seen, and that just tells everyone who can't see the restaurant what the restaurant looks like.
It's beautiful. Thanks for having me.
Thanks so much.
The Digital Restaurant Podcast is available for you to follow and subscribe wherever you listen to your podcasts. Watch us, rate us, and subscribe to The Digital Restaurant on YouTube, and follow along on all our social media digital restaurant channels. Thanks for listening.